March 3, 1944, 05:27 a.m. North Sea, altitude 22,000 feet. The cold was not just cold. It was something else entirely. It crawled under your skin, past the layers of wool and leather, and settled deep in your bones like it had always belonged there. You didn't feel your fingertips, and you stopped trying. Breathing through the oxygen mask felt like sucking ice through a straw. The wind outside was a distant roar, but inside the cockpit everything was quiet, too quiet. My name is Michael. At that time I was 22. I flew in the 56th Fighter Group, escorting bombers over Europe. We called them the Big Friends. Big, loud, slow targets that needed our protection. We flew tight, just a little above and behind them. Sometimes we joked that they were flying barns, but today there were no jokes. Not a single laugh in the intercom, just static and breath. I remember glancing to my right and catching sight of George through the glass of the B-17's nose turret. He looked like a statue, his chin resting on his gloved hand, eyes fixed on the endless blue-gray ahead. George wasn't the type to stay quiet. He always had a smart comment, a bad pun, or some dirty joke from back home in Boston, but not today. Today, even George had run out of words. The sky was beautiful in that terrifying kind of way. You know the feeling when something's too calm, like the world is holding its breath. The contrails of our group drew long white scars across the heavens, perfectly aligned. Below us, only clouds and ocean, nothing else. It felt like we were flying over the edge of the world. The mission was supposed to be routine, another round trip to the coast of occupied Holland, keep the Luftwaffe off our bombers, bring everybody home in time for dinner. But you stop believing in routine after your third mission. And by your 10th, you know that every time you climb into that plane, there's a chance you'll never climb out. I wasn't scared, not in the way people expect. I wasn't shaking or praying. It was more like a constant weight pressing on my chest. Not panic, but a slow dread. Like hearing the first crack in the ice beneath your feet and realizing you're too far from the shore. The air smelled like oil and gunpowder and leather, and beneath it, sweat. Not fresh sweat, but the kind that sticks to your suit and reminds you how long you've been doing this. My oxygen hose hissed quietly. The engines hummed. But inside, I was somewhere else. My thoughts drifted to my sister's wedding photo tucked inside my jacket, to the warmth of the diner back home, to the taste of apple pie. Memories came without warning, like ghosts, and every one of them felt like goodbye. We knew what could happen. We all did. But knowing it and feeling it are different things. You don't feel it when you're training in Arizona. You don't feel it when you're polishing your boots. You feel it here, 22,000 feet up in the frozen silence, watching the wingtip of your buddy's plane just a few feet away and wondering if he'll be alive in an hour. They say war makes boys into men, but the truth is, it turns men into shadows. You begin to exist in fragments, a voice in the radio, a name on a clipboard, a shape disappearing into the clouds. We were young, yes, but we weren't boys anymore. Not after what we'd seen. The clouds below began to shift, thickening, moving like something alive. The ocean disappeared beneath them, swallowed whole. Visibility dropped. We adjusted formation. One of the bombers up front flicked his landing lights in a coded signal. We responded. A dance of survival, rehearsed 100 times. It was then that I noticed my hands were trembling, not violently. Just enough to remind me I was still human. Just enough to whisper that something was wrong. The formation held, but the silence grew heavier, as if the sky itself was warning us. There is something you need to understand about fear at altitude. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's cold, it's silent, it doesn't scream, it waits. And somewhere out there, beyond that blanket of clouds, something was waiting for us too. If you made it this far, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. If you felt something, a memory, a shiver, a reflection, subscribe and help us keep stories like this alive. Every voice counts, every memory matters. It started with a sound I had never heard before. Not a scream, not an explosion, just a sharp, unnatural snap, like a dry branch breaking under weight. It came from the bomber in front of us, and it echoed through the sky in a way that didn't make sense. I looked up just in time to see a burst of orange flame erupt from the No. 3 engine of the lead B-17. The fire wasn't big, not at first, just a puff, like someone had lit a match against the wind. But in that split second, you realize how fragile these steel giants really are. A bomber is a city in the sky. 10 men, thousands of gallons of fuel, dozens of moving parts working in delicate harmony. When one thing fails, everything else begins to crumble. There was no warning, no incoming flak, no enemy in sight, just that sudden break in reality. The engine choked, sputtered, and then died with a low metallic groan. The bomber dropped slightly, banking to the left, as if the wind had suddenly turned hostile. I could see the crew scrambling inside, tiny silhouettes behind layers of armored glass. One of them waved frantically. I couldn't tell if he was signaling for help or just reacting to the chaos. Then the radio came alive, not with words, with noise. Screeching static, a burst of panicked chatter, one voice yelling something unintelligible, another trying to stay calm, and then a phrase that cut through everything. We're hit. Number 3 is gone. Losing altitude. My mouth went dry, not because of fear, but because the air around us suddenly felt heavier, like the sky itself was pushing down on our formation. The B-17 tried to maintain altitude, tried to stay in line with the rest, but it was too late. Flames were licking the wing now. The bomber began to roll, slowly at first, then faster. The formation broke apart as planes veered away to avoid collision. What had been a perfectly aligned row of silver arrows now looked like scattered birds, and then came the second sound. Dull, deep, unmistakable. Gunfire. Tracer rounds sliced through the clouds from above and behind, bright red streaks cutting across the gray sky. My first instinct was to look for the source, but there was nothing visible. No silhouettes. No black crosses, no familiar enemy shapes. Just death arriving without a face. The sky lit up with fire and movement. One of the Mustangs to our left peeled away sharply. A puff of smoke followed it as it dropped toward the cloud cover. Another burst of gunfire, then another. And still, we saw no enemy. They were above us, somewhere in the sun, hiding in the light. That was the trick they had perfected. Dive in fast, fire once, and disappear. We called it the boom and zoom, and they had it down to a science. I pulled hard on the stick and banked right. My vision blurred for a second as G-forces pressed me into the seat. My heart was beating so fast, it felt like it might rupture through the suit. I scanned the skies, searching for shadows, reflections, anything that looked out of place. Nothing, but I could hear it. The tearing sound of bullets punching through aluminum. The quick, violent bark of enemy cannons. Somewhere out there, men were dying, and there was nothing I could do about it. The worst part of aerial combat is the silence between the sounds, the gaps. 1 second you're surrounded by noise, metal screaming, radios howling. The next, it all vanishes. And in that stillness, you imagine the worst. You picture flames, you picture falling bodies, you picture your own name on a list. Another radio burst. We lost Red 2. He went straight down. My stomach turned. Red 2 was Tommy, 19, fresh out of training. He barely had time to paint his name on the nose of his plane, and now he was gone, swallowed by the sea below. I don't remember thinking, only reacting. I pulled the nose up and tried to climb above the cloud line, maybe get a better view, maybe find the bastard who was doing this. But there was no vengeance in the sky that day, only survival. The formation was scattered. The bombers tried to regroup. The fighters danced through the air, looking for ghosts. The enemy was efficient. Strike once, disappear. Leave you wondering if you imagined the whole thing. And that was the genius of it. They didn't need to shoot down all of us. Just enough to plant the fear. Just enough to make us hesitate next time. To make us question the silence. To teach us that even clear skies could hide killers. I felt a vibration in the controls. Checked my instruments. Everything looked fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Not in the plane. In me. It wasn't just fear. It was the beginning of something deeper. The realization that this wasn't a game of heroism. It was a slow, grinding storm of attrition. A war fought not just with bullets, but with doubt, exhaustion, and the quiet unraveling of young men's minds. As we climbed out of the immediate danger zone, I looked down at the sea. It stretched forever, cold and unknowable. Somewhere below, pieces of Tommy's plane were sinking into the deep, 100 feet at a time. And maybe a part of him too, a part no one would ever recover. Back on comms, the flight lead's voice came through. Calm, professional. We're reforming. Maintain altitude. Keep tight spacing. Eyes open. We obeyed, because that's what we were trained to do. But I don't think any of us saw the same sky after that. It wasn't just blue anymore. It was a mirror, and it showed us who we really were. If this story struck something in you, don't let it fade. Leave a comment below. Tell us what it made you feel. And if you believe these memories deserve to be kept alive, subscribe. These voices are fading. Help us make them echo just a little longer. When the fire reached the left wing, we all knew it was over. The bomber was no longer flying. It was falling with dignity, controlled for as long as it could be, like a wounded animal refusing to collapse in front of its pack. The pilot, God bless him, fought the controls like a man trying to hold back a flood with his bare hands. But gravity, fire, and fate don't take orders from men. I was watching it from maybe 400 yards back, trying to maintain position, but my hands weren't steady anymore. The plane in front of me was no longer a machine. It was a funeral in motion. One engine dead, the other straining under the weight. Black smoke trailing behind like a banner of surrender. The tail gunner was still firing short bursts into the empty sky, refusing to give up even when there was nothing left to shoot at. That is something you never forget. That kind of defiance, that kind of fear. The moment it broke formation, everything went quiet in my headset. No orders, no panic, just silence. We all knew what was coming. We had seen it before, but watching a bird fall never feels the same way twice. Each one is its own death. The nose dipped, the left wing caught air wrong. The bomber rolled slowly like it was being tipped by some invisible hand, and then it dropped. Not a spiral, not a dive, just a fall. Clean, heavy, unstoppable. Time slows in moments like that. You stop being a pilot, you become a witness. Some of the crew bailed out. I saw 3 parachutes open, maybe 4. I tried to count, but my vision was blurring, and my hands had gone numb. One chute got tangled, another drifted too close to the fire. I looked away before I saw what happened. Then the sea came up to meet it, hard and fast. The impact was almost elegant. The fuselage hit the water and exploded outward in a bloom of spray and flame. No Hollywood fireball, just metal tearing, foam rising, and a distant echo that somehow reached us even through the roar of our own engines. That sound stayed with me, still does. We circled, standard procedure, try to mark the location, maybe survivors in rafts, maybe something to report, but there was nothing. Only wreckage, debris scattered like confetti across the waves, a seat cushion, a wing fragment, someone's boot. I heard someone whisper on the comms. Might have been a prayer, might have been a name. Then came the command. Break off, maintain course, regroup, just like that. A whole crew gone, and we moved on. My bomber was hit next. Not directly, but close enough. I heard a bang behind me and felt the shudder through the fuselage. The engine coughed once. Warning lights blinked. I checked gauges. Oil pressure dropping, temperature spiking. We were losing power. The co-pilot, Charlie, was already checking the damage. Cool as ever. He turned to me and nodded. That same half smile he wore every time we got shot at, like it was all part of the job. Feather number 2. Try to hold altitude. Let's not swim today. I forced a laugh, but my stomach was twisting. We were too far from land, too close to the enemy coast, and now down one engine. The odds were not kind. We held altitude for 3 minutes, then 2, then none. The plane began to sink, slow at first, like it was tired, like it was giving up piece by piece. We dropped to 16,000 feet, then 12. The other fighters were already fading ahead. We radioed our position. Mayday, losing power, preparing to ditch. Ditching a heavy plane in the North Sea is like trying to land a piano on glass. If you hit wrong, the wings snap and the fuselage breaks apart. If you hit too hard, the cockpit crumples like a tin can. We had practiced it in theory. But practice doesn't matter when your bones are vibrating and every second feels like a countdown. Charlie took the controls. I handled the gear. We shut down the remaining engines to glide in. The wind outside screamed like something alive. The nose dipped. The sea rose. I remember every inch of that descent, the way the clouds parted, the way the light shifted, the way my breath caught in my throat. We hit. Not a crash, not an explosion, just a slam. A gut punch from the ocean itself. Everything inside the cockpit went airborne. Equipment, helmets, Blood! My forehead hit the dash, something cracked, and then water. Water like a wall. Water like teeth. Cold, unforgiving, hungry water pouring in from every seam, every crack, every betrayal of metal. It filled the floor, then the seat, then the chest. I unbuckled and kicked. The cockpit was tilted. Charlie was unconscious, slumped forward. I grabbed him, yanked, pulled with everything I had. His leg was stuck. I screamed something I don't remember. My lungs burned. My hand slipped. Then he came free. We moved fast after that. No thinking, just instinct, just survival. I grabbed the emergency raft from behind the seat, flipped the hatch. Light poured in like a blessing. We climbed out. The nose of the plane was already under, the tail sticking up like a monument. I didn't look back. The sea was brutal, waves like walls, wind that tore the voice from your throat. But we found the raft, inflated it, crawled in, shaking, shivering, breathing, alive, barely. I sat there, soaked, bloodied, coughing, holding on to Charlie with one hand, the raft with the other. My ears were ringing. My mouth tasted like metal. The sky above was empty again. The battle had moved on without us. But we were not part of that anymore. We were adrift, between the sky we left and the sea that wanted to keep us. And in that in-between, time stopped. If this moment touched something inside you, let it breathe. Leave a comment. Tell someone you listened. Share this story so the silence of the sea does not drown it. And if you believe these memories deserve to live on, subscribe, because remembering is a form of honor, and some names are only kept alive when we speak them out loud. The moment we hit the water, I thought we were safe. That was the first lie the ocean told me. We were alive, yes, but only technically. The sea didn't care that we had survived a crash. It didn't care that we were young, bruised, or bleeding. It only cared about one thing, taking us, quietly, slowly, without drama. The raft was barely holding air. Inflated in a panic with frozen fingers, the seams weren't sealed right. It groaned under our weight as we climbed in, drenched and shivering. The cold hit like a hammer. I've never felt anything like it before or since. It wasn't just cold on the skin. It sank in, beneath muscle, beneath bone. It reached your thoughts, changed them. The kind of cold that convinces you maybe dying wouldn't be so bad if it meant feeling nothing. Charlie wasn't talking. He was curled against the far side of the raft, eyes half shut, lips blue. I slapped his face a couple of times. He blinked, barely. I told him he had to stay awake, keep moving, say something, but he just stared at the sky like it had betrayed him. I started pumping the emergency beacon, a little hand-crank device wired to a tiny antenna. 1 minute on, 1 minute off. The crank turned stiff in my frozen hand. I didn't know if anyone would hear us. I didn't know if the thing even worked, but I kept cranking, not because I had hope, but because if I stopped moving, I was sure I'd never start again. Every few seconds, a gust of wind would catch the edge of the raft and splash water over us. Salt stung the cuts on my face. My gloves were gone. Torn off during the crash or the scramble, I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. I wasn't even sure they were still there. The sea around us looked endless, dark, indifferent, the kind of gray that has no depth, just shadow upon shadow, like looking into eternity through dirty glass. Somewhere to the east, a sliver of sunlight pushed through the clouds, but it didn't bring warmth. It just made the cold feel even more personal, like it was choosing us. I tried to think. I tried to remember training. How long could we last in the water? How long before hypothermia took over? I remembered the manual said something like 15 to 30 minutes in water, this cold. But we weren't in the water. We were half in, half out. So what did that give us? An hour? 2? Charlie whispered something. What? He repeated it, softer this time. Do you think they'll find us? I wanted to lie. Say yes. Say of course. Say anything that might lift the weight pressing down on both of us. But I didn't. I just looked at him and said, I don't know. He nodded, like that answer was enough. Time stopped meaning anything. Minutes blurred into each other. My jaw hurt from clenching. My eyes burned from the salt. Somewhere behind us, oil from the wreck was floating on the surface, a thin black sheen that shimmered in the half-light. Death turned beautiful. I started counting waves to stay sane. 1, 2, 3, up, down, repeat. Somewhere in the hundreds, I stopped. Not because I was tired, but because I no longer cared what number came next. A gull flew overhead at one point, just one. pure white against the gray. It circled once, then vanished. I remember feeling jealous. That bird had wings. That bird had somewhere to be. I didn't. Charlie coughed. I reached over and held his shoulder, tried to keep him upright. His head was lolling a bit. I knew what that meant. The cold was winning. It was getting in, stealing little pieces of him with every breath. I tried to remember his mother's name. He had mentioned her once. Said she made the best peach cobbler in Illinois. I pictured her hands, her kitchen, her apron. I pictured him as a boy, sitting at the table, warm, fed, loved. I whispered to him, trying to hold that image, told him to think about home, think about the smell of bread, the sound of his sister's piano, anything to keep the cold from turning him into stone. But his eyes kept slipping shut. Then I saw it, a flash on the horizon. Not lightning, not sunlight, something more deliberate. A glint of metal, then a low drone, distant, deep, rhythmic, the kind of sound you feel before you hear it. I grabbed the flare gun. My hands were useless. I couldn't even wrap them around the grip. I used my teeth to pull the cap off, loaded it, aimed into the sky and prayed the wind wouldn't steal it. The red flare arced upward, struggled, then bloomed. Seconds passed, then minutes. The drone grew louder, and suddenly the shape of a plane emerged through the clouds. A Catalina, fat, beautiful, slow, like a miracle with wings. It circled once, then again. I waved both arms, screamed until my throat tore open. Charlie didn't move. I held him tighter. Then the rescue team dropped a raft. It hit the water a few yards away. Men in suits shouting, rowing. I couldn't hear the words, only the urgency. They pulled us in, wrapped us in blankets that felt like fire. I cried, not because I was saved, but because I had finally stopped pretending I was not afraid. They checked Charlie first. His pulse was faint, but it was there. I collapsed in the corner of the rescue plane, eyes open, heart numb, body trembling, and I realized something I would never forget. The cold doesn't kill you fast. It waits, it whispers, and then it takes. But that day, it didn't win. And if you're still here with me, I ask you, as one survivor to another, let this story live. Leave a comment, speak their names, subscribe if you believe the past should not be forgotten. Not every battle is fought with guns. Some are fought with silence, and stories are the only weapons we have left. The sound came first, a low humming, soft at first, almost like a memory returning. At that moment, I wasn't sure if it was real or just something my brain had conjured to survive. The cold had turned everything distant. Sounds, thoughts, time, but then it grew louder, steady, mechanical, a heartbeat in the sky. I forced my eyes open and turned toward the noise. The clouds broke just enough to reveal it. A black shape against the pale sky, wings wide and slow. It was moving, like it wasn't in a rush, like it knew we had nowhere else to be. It was a consolidated PBY Catalina, one of the U.S. Navy's flying boats used for rescue operations. We called them Dumbo, the kind of plane you joked about back at base, but prayed to see if things went wrong. We lit the last flare. This time I didn't need my hands. One of the rescue crew did it for me. The red spark cracked into the air and left a trail of smoke that cut across the sea like a signal of defiance. The Catalina dipped its wings. That simple gesture felt like a handshake from God. Within minutes, it circled again, closer now. They dropped a small motorized raft manned by 2 sailors in bulky suits. One of them had a red cross on his shoulder. They rowed with urgency, cutting through the chop with practiced strokes. I could barely lift my arm to wave, but it didn't matter. They had already seen us. When they reached us, the first sailor leaned over the raft and looked me in the eye. His voice was calm, low, and professional. "You're all right now. We've got you. Stay with me." He could have said anything and I would have believed him. That voice didn't carry panic. It carried certainty. And in that moment, certainty was worth more than food or heat or even hope. They checked Charlie first. He was limp, face ashen, lips cracked. They pressed 2 fingers to his neck, then moved fast. Blankets, warm packs, and oxygen from a small tank. I heard someone whisper he had a pulse, faint, but there. Then it was my turn. I tried to help them lift me, but my limbs didn't respond. My brain gave the order, but the body had declared independence. They pulled me aboard like I weighed nothing, wrapped me in wool, and doused my face with warm saline. The heat burned. It felt like someone was peeling my skin off with fire, but I welcomed it. Pain meant I was still there. When we reached the Catalina, they hoisted us in through the side hatch. Inside, the air was thick with diesel and sweat, but to me, it smelled like life, like a basement heater in the middle of winter. The crew didn't ask questions. They didn't celebrate. They just worked. The interior was cramped, noisy, and cold, but it may as well have been a palace. One of the medics gave me a tin cup of something hot. It tasted like metal and gasoline, but I drank it anyway. Every sip thawed another piece of me. Charlie was laid out on a stretcher. His eyes fluttered open for a moment, and I swear I saw something flicker behind them. Recognition, maybe, or just the last spark of a body refusing to quit. One of the crewmen tightened the straps around him, whispering something I couldn't hear. They didn't treat him like a casualty. They treated him like a brother. That stayed with me. No one asked what happened. Not yet. They didn't need the story. They already knew the ending. The Catalina banked east, away from the last known combat zone. I pressed my forehead to the cold metal of the cabin wall and looked out through the porthole. The sea was behind us now, trailing off into a blur of blue and gray. Somewhere down there, the wreck of our plane was sleeping in the dark, along with the wreckage of others. Silent graveyards without stones, without names, without prayers. The crew passed around ration packs. I didn't eat. My stomach was a knotted rope. Instead, I took the wax paper wrapper from the food and folded it again and again. Something to do with my hands. Something to keep the noise in my head from getting louder. One of the men across from me was humming softly, a tune I couldn't place. Maybe it was just for him, maybe it was for all of us. As the flight continued, I started to feel the weight of exhaustion press down harder. Not sleep, depletion. Like I had nothing left to give to the world. Nothing to take from it either. Just empty, not numb, not cold, just done. We touched down hours later, somewhere along the English coast. I don't remember the name of the airfield. Just the gravel under my boots and the smell of wet earth. They took Charlie away first, wheeled into an ambulance with a canvas flap. I tried to follow but stumbled. A hand grabbed my arm. A British officer in a brown coat. He didn't speak, just looked at me and nodded once, as if to say, "You've done enough." Inside the base infirmary, they checked us for exposure, infection, trauma. The nurses were kind, efficient, but their eyes told the real story. They had seen too many like us. Boys turned inside out by the sky. When they left me alone, I sat on the edge of the cot and stared at my boots, still wet, still carrying salt from the North Sea. I didn't take them off, couldn't, like somehow they were the only thing holding me together. Outside the window, the clouds were starting to break. A thin sliver of sun touched the tarmac, making the puddles shine like mirrors. I caught my reflection in the glass, pale, hollow, but alive. There is no celebration in survival, only silence. You come back with less than you left with, less blood, less breath, less belief in the idea that things will return to normal. They won't, not really, but you are here. And if you made it through this story, I ask you to carry it forward. Not for me, for Charlie, for every name that never made it past the waves. Leave a comment, speak their memory, and if these voices feel worth keeping alive, consider subscribing. In a world that forgets so quickly, remembrance becomes resistance, and stories become salvation. They gave me a pencil and a blank envelope the morning after. The nurse placed them gently on the small table next to my cot, along with a tin mug of lukewarm coffee. She didn't say much, just nodded, then moved on to the next bed. But I knew what that envelope was for. Everyone who survived was given one. It was for the letter to the family. The one that was never supposed to be yours to write. George's name was written on the casualty board in the hallway outside the infirmary. Last name, rank, and one simple word next to it. Missing, not killed, not confirmed, just missing. A word that sounds softer than it is, but we all knew what it meant. The sea didn't give back. He had been my bunkmate for the last 5 months, slept 3 feet away from me every night, ate from the same tin tray, shared stories about his dog back home. He had a sister who played the violin, and a mother who sent cookies in a shoebox wrapped in old newspapers. We used to eat them together after missions, sitting on overturned crates behind the barracks, trying not to talk about what we'd seen that day. Now I was sitting alone at a desk in a quiet office, that smelled like ink and linseed oil. Trying to write to that same mother, my hands trembled over the paper. Not from the cold, from something heavier. I wrote her name at the top, Mrs. Margaret Whitmore. Then I stopped. How do you explain to someone that their son vanished in a sky filled with flame and steel and silence? That his last words were not heard and his last moments were not witnessed? That there is no grave to visit, no marker to weep beside, only waves and wind? I stared at the page for what felt like hours. Every time I tried to begin, the pencil tip hovered and refused to move. Words are traitors in moments like that. They shrink, they hide, they break under the weight of what they are supposed to carry. I thought about writing something poetic, something noble. He died a hero. He gave everything for freedom. But those weren't my words. They were just phrases we borrowed from officers, from chaplains, from those who never had to see what the inside of a burning bomber looks like. And George wasn't a phrase, he was real, so I tried something else. I told her about the time he helped patch my jacket with a sewing kit he stole from the infirmary, about the way he used to whistle Sinatra while cleaning his boots, about how he kept a crumpled picture of her tucked inside his flight suit, folded so many times that her face had almost disappeared. I told her that on the morning of the mission, he gave me the last butterscotch from his stash. No ceremony, no speech, just handed it to me and said, "Take it, you look like hell." That was the last thing he said to me. I didn't write about the fire. I didn't describe the way his bomber rolled out of formation. I didn't say how helpless we all were watching it fall. Those details weren't mine to give. They belong to the ocean now. Instead, I ended the letter with something simple. Your son was brave. He was kind. He made us laugh when the world forgot how, and he was loved here. I signed my name at the bottom, folded the paper, slid it into the envelope with hands that still carried the salt of the sea. No stamp. The army would deliver it, somehow. That night, I didn't sleep. The cot creaked under every turn. The wind outside the barracks howled through the cracks in the walls. I could hear someone 2 bunks over crying into their pillow. I didn't ask who. We had all lost someone. Grief in war is not loud. It's quiet. It's the absence of a voice during breakfast, the untouched cup on the mess hall table, the smell of shaving cream from a kit that will never be opened again. Some men dealt with it by shutting down. Others got drunk and started fights. I wrote letters, not just for George, but for others too. Whenever someone didn't make it back and their buddy couldn't bring themselves to write the words, I stepped in. I had the curse of remembering everything, the way they talked, what they wore, what they feared. There was a name for it later, survivor's guilt. But at the time, it didn't have a label. It was just weight, the kind that follows you like a shadow, not heavy enough to crush you, but too heavy to ever put down. I kept copies of those letters for a while, stuffed into a small notebook I carried in my jacket. They were never meant to be read again, just reminders that once, for a brief flicker in history, these men had existed, that they were more than statistics, more than dog tags, more than debris. Years later, I burned that notebook, not out of anger, but because I was afraid of forgetting how to feel. The pages had started to become just paper, and I couldn't let that happen. What stayed with me was not the words, it was the silence after sealing the envelope, that heavy pause between finishing the letter and handing it over, like the last heartbeat of a memory before it leaves your chest. And if you're still here, listening, feeling something stir where words usually don't reach, let that be the reason you comment. Let that be why you subscribe. Because these stories are not just mine. They belong to every family that ever waited by a door that never opened. And every name deserves more than a silence no one remembers. When I returned to base, they handed me a fresh uniform, pressed, clean, without a scratch. Like it was meant for someone untouched by war. I slipped it on slowly, as if I didn't quite belong in it anymore. My skin didn't feel like mine. My body walked, saluted, nodded, but somewhere along the way, something inside had stayed back in the water. I wasn't wounded, at least not in any way a medic could measure. No stitches, no cast, no scar to explain the way I moved a little slower, flinched a little harder, stared a little longer at nothing at all. But something was gone. I couldn't explain it then. Still struggle to now. People said I was lucky, and they were right. I was lucky to breathe, lucky to stand. lucky to feel rain on my face and the heat of soup in my hands. But the kind of luck they meant didn't sit well with me, because when you come back from something like that, you come back with more than your own life. You carry the weight of the ones who didn't. There was a boy named Eddie in our unit, 17 when he forged his papers to enlist. Smiled like a movie star, died on his second mission. I remember watching his bunk get stripped by the quartermaster. Blanket, boots, dog tags. Folded, packed, erased, like he was never there. I started forgetting how to talk about normal things. Conversations became fragile. I would sit with the others in the mess hall and nod along, but words sounded hollow coming out of my mouth. They'd talk about weekend passes or girls back home or plans for after the war, and all I could think about was the silence in the raft, or George's last joke, or the cold. The base chaplain called it combat fatigue, said it happened to the best of us, offered to pray. I thanked him, but what I needed wasn't prayer. I needed stillness, something that would hold me without demanding anything in return. I began spending long hours alone, sitting by the edge of the runway, watching the planes take off and land. The engines roared, the wind whipped dust in my eyes, but it gave me comfort. It was a ritual, steel going up, steel coming down. Some returned, some didn't, but the sky always opened for them. There were moments I felt anger, sharp and bright, not at the enemy, not even at the war, but at the randomness of it all. Why Charlie and not me? Why Eddie and not the guy who skipped every safety check? Why do some planes get riddled and make it home, and others vanish into smoke with no warning? You learn not to ask those questions out loud, because there are no answers, only silence. And silence has a way of filling you if you let it. Sleep became a battlefield of its own. Dreams weren't dreams anymore. They were vivid, looping reels of noise and fire, of water rising, of screams that never finished. I would wake up soaked in sweat, fists clenched, breath shallow. Sometimes I'd still hear the ocean, as if it had followed me ashore. One night I punched the wall beside my bed, didn't feel it, didn't care. My knuckles bled quietly. Another night I woke up standing outside the barracks, barefoot, shaking. The guard on duty walked me back inside without a word. He had that look in his eyes too. That faraway stare you only get after you've seen too much and said too little. Letters from home started piling up. I read them, sometimes twice, but couldn't find the energy to reply. What could I say that wouldn't sound like a lie? That everything was fine? That I was fine? The truth was, I didn't know what I was anymore. I was a man made of memories, stitched together with silence. I went back to flying, not because I wanted to, but because it was the only thing I still knew how to do. The cockpit felt more honest than a chair or a bed. Up there, the world made sense. The engines hum, the instruments glowing, the sky stretching out forever. It was where I had lost everything, but it was also where I felt closest to the ones I had lost. Every time I took off, I whispered the names: George, Eddie, Mason. The list grew longer. Each mission became a kind of prayer, not for victory, not even for survival, just for meaning, just to feel like their deaths had weight. And in some strange way, they were still with me, in the reflection of the canopy glass, in the tremble of the stick, in the pause before I throttled up. Not ghosts, not visions, just memory wrapped in motion. We never spoke much about what we had seen. Not in those days. Men didn't call it trauma or processing. We called it shutting up and doing the job. But it left marks, deep ones. You could see it in the way some guys avoided looking at the empty bunks, or how others folded their uniforms too neatly, like they were trying to control something, anything. Years later, I would meet some of those men again, at reunions, at funerals. The ones who made it through wore the same eyes, older, tired, but carrying the same quiet that had once filled that raft in the middle of the sea. We didn't talk about heroism. We talked about soup, about how bad the coffee was, about how we missed cigarettes that didn't taste like chalk. And sometimes, when the room grew quiet, one of us would say a name, just a name, and the silence that followed said everything else. If you've listened to all this and something inside you still feels heavy, I ask you to honor that feeling. Drop a comment, light a candle in the form of your words, and if this kind of truth matters to you, hit subscribe. Because not all uniforms leave stains, some leave echoes, and those echoes need someone to hear them. They say time heals, but time doesn't heal. Time just softens the edges until you forget how sharp they once were. Years passed, decades even. The uniforms were packed away, medals placed in drawers, photographs faded on mantels where dust now settled more often than hands. Life returned in pieces like a puzzle with missing parts, and you learned to live around the absence. Not beyond it, never beyond it. I walked away from that war with my body whole, but parts of me stayed in the sky, in the water, and in the eyes of boys who never came home. Every time I looked at a sunset, I saw the color of flames licking the wing of George's bomber. Every time I heard the distant rumble of thunder, I thought of the Catalina circling overhead like a slow-moving angel. Every time I closed my eyes in silence, I heard names whispered in the dark. Names that deserved more than silence. War didn't make me a hero, it made me a witness. And being a witness means you remember what others forget. I remember the laughter in the barracks before a mission, the way a man would fold his letters 3 times so they'd fit just right in his chest pocket. I remember the nervous tapping of boots before takeoff, the prayers mumbled under breath, the smell of oil and metal that clung to everything we touched. I remember how George would squint when he smiled, how Charlie refused to wear his helmet until the very last minute, how Eddie, just a kid, would hum jazz tunes because it calmed his nerves. I remember the silence of the raft, the cold that stole our words, the voice on the radio saying one less call sign than we started with. These are the things that live in me. The war didn't end in May 1945. It ended slowly, one funeral at a time, one letter unopened, one veteran forgotten in a hospital bed. It ended in the long looks across dinner tables where sons never returned. It ended in stories that were never told because the pain was too much or the memories too fragile. But today, I'm telling it. Because some memories need to be carried forward, even if they hurt, especially if they hurt. We cannot rewrite the past, we cannot bring back the ones we lost, but we can remember them with dignity, not as shadows, not as statistics, but as men, as brothers, as boys who once flew too close to the sun and left their names in the clouds. If this story has meant something to you, I ask you, no, I invite you to keep it alive. Speak their names. Share this story with someone who needs to know that silence isn't the end, that grief can be memory, and memory can be purpose. Leave a comment, not just for me, for George, for Charlie, for the kid from Chicago who hummed to stay sane. If you made it this far, you are part of this story now too. And if you feel ready, click the next video that's about to appear on your screen. Another story waits there, another name, another echo from a past we must never forget. Thank you for listening. Thank you for remembering. And to those who never came back, we never stopped hearing you.